Hey, Blackbird behind people. I hope things are going well. I'm going to try this again. I keep messing up my recording, so we'll see here. All right, we are in chapter 6 of Blackbird Pond. Remember in chapter 5, they invited the Reverend and John Holbrook over for dinner. In chapter 6, then, we kind of get a bit of that dinner. Now, the Reverend is very polite and makes sure he thanks Rachel for a beautiful meal. And I got a kick out of Kit because she says, well, man, he should have liked it. We've just been cleaning for 4 days and we had to go without sugar, and he has no idea how much work this meal took up. Does that sound familiar to anybody? I'm sure my kids would tell you it is definitely familiar in our house. When we know we've got company coming over, that monster comes out, Mom wants everything spick and span and perfect, and they will clean until it is done so. Well, as the meal goes on, we notice that our author makes sure to point out that Matthew Wood had hardly eaten little and spoken scarcely a word, that Rachel looked tired and flustered, and even Mercy was unusually quiet. And we go on in the chapter to learn why. Do you remember? Did you say it was because of the political tensions in there? If you did, yes. Now remember, Kit she thinks that the Reverend is a pompous jerk. He's arrogant. But he knew her grandfather, and he knew her grandfather was a loyalist. He was a true kingsman. And he says on the top of page 61, he says, just make sure that you keep your allegiance. And it says, with an abrupt scrape of the wood, Matthew pushed back his chair. Her allegiance is in no danger in this house, he announced angrily. What are you implying, Gershom? Now, Gershom says, or the Reverend says, well, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm not implying anything. But discuss amongst yourselves. Do you think that the Reverend knew that Matthew wasn't a loyalist, that he was unhappy with the king? What do you think? I'm like you. I'm not, or I don't know what you said, I guess, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to err on that. Yeah, he is, because Matthew doesn't seem like the type of man who does well with poker face, can keep his emotions to himself. Have you ever seen those people? You know exactly what they're thinking just by looking at their face. I have one of those. You usually know what I'm thinking. I don't play poker very well either. But Matthew is not happy with the king. Now, he's not out and out openly opposed to the king. He can't be. He can be arrested, or worse if he's considered a traitor to the crown. But he's not happy. He said, we only ask to keep the rights that have already been granted to the charter. He's asking the king not to take away any more rights, and the fact that the king kind of keeps taking and taking is irking Matthew, and rightfully so. So Matthew and the Reverend definitely have some political tension there. Well, Mercy tries to ease that tension and says, hey, I really just wanted to hear the Reverend read. And the Reverend says, oh, well, I'm trying to coddle and keep my voice for Sunday, but John here will read beautifully. Now note that Kit says at the bottom of page 62, 1 week in Wethersfield seemed to have changed the dignified young man she had known on shipboard. Tonight he appeared to be a shadow, hanging on to every word from this pompous, opinionated man. So on the ship, she didn't always agree with John, but she saw him as strong. She saw him as, as very stout to his beliefs, very true to his beliefs. And now she sees him kind of like a little fan, following around this Reverend. And she doesn't like it. She doesn't agree with it. She wants him to be his own person instead of this follower. But she does, we find out, she does enjoy listening to his voice. He has a very methodic voice. It's almost like music, a very musical voice. So she enjoys him reading. Matthew does not enjoy the psalm that the Reverend picked out to read. The fact that he knew that psalm right off the top of his head the proverb amazed me. But as we go on then, we learn a little bit more about Mercy. And as the Reverend concludes the evening, he says, She says a phrase of Dr. Bulkeley's prayer caught Kit's attention again. And bless our sister in her weakness and affliction. Whom did he mean? Heavens, was he talking about Mercy? Had the man no perception at all? How Mercy must be shriveling at the fulsome words. After a few days in the household, Kit ceased to be aware of Mercy's lameness. No one in the family ever referred to it. Mercy certainly did not consider herself afflicted. She did a full day's work and more. Moreover, Kit soon discovered that Mercy was the pivot about whom the whole household moved. She coaxed her father out of his bitter moods, upheld her timorous and anxious mother, gently restrained her rebellious sister, and had reached to draw an uncertain alien into the circle. Mercy weak? Why, the man could not even open his eyes. Now we learn a little bit about two characters. We learn some characterization here. What do we learn about Mercy and her character? Discuss in your group, please. Are you back? All right, now, based on Kit's opinion, what do we learn about the Reverend? What does she mean that could he not even use his eyes? Had the man no perception at all? What do we learn about the Reverend here? What does Kit mean by saying this? Why do you think the author chose to put this in here? What is it saying about our Reverend? Are you back? I don't know. To me, the Reverend's kind of too much for his own britches. Does that make sense? He is a little bit too arrogant. He doesn't really see people for who they are. And Kit, that's the first thing she's noticed about Mercy, is that Mercy's the pivot around what everybody else moves. Now, what does she mean? When you think of a pivot in the field, it says she is the pivot about whom the whole household moved. So she's the center point. So she's like by your well. She's that pivot by the well, or by wherever the foundation of your pivot is. And the rest of the pivot's going to move around that point. You know, whether you have a wiper pivot or whatever. She's the very foundation of it. What does that tell us about Mercy? She's here, and the rest of the family pivots around her. She holds that family together. She's the one that can calm her dad down. She's the one that can calm her mom down. She's the one that can bring her sister back in. And she's the one that welcomed in Kit. Does that take a strong individual or a weak one? Why? Discuss. All right. As the chapter goes on, then we learn that Matthew says that young William Ashby has asked to call upon Kit. Well, who's upset by this? Kit at first is shocked, right? She's like, why? And Judith is really shocked. She kind of dropped her pen. What? Kit? And she says, yeah, his dad has this prime land set aside for him to build his house once he chose somebody, and he was close to making a choice. Well, before Kit arrived, who does Judith think that young William Ashby is going to pick? Did you say her? Yes. She and Mercy both thought this. In fact, if you remember, and Kit remembers during this time, that first morning she was there when Judith tried on her gown and said, oh, if William could only see me in this. And what is Kit's reaction? She's like, I'll just tell Uncle I don't want to meet. I'll tell him whatever you need me to tell him so that I don't ruin this. Kit does not want to bring any more strife into the Wood household than she already has. So she's trying to make things right. And Judith says, no, just go on. Besides, I already have my eyes on John Holbrook. So Judith thought she was going to get to marry William Ashby, right? I'm sorry, guys. Thought she was going to get to marry William Ashby. That's who she hoped. And notice what she thought was important with William Ashby. And the fact that he already had land set aside for a big house. And you're going to notice this more. But what conflict do you think this is going to cause for Judith with herself, for Kit with herself, for Judith and Kit together? And how will Mercy be affected by this? Discuss that. Discuss the person versus person conflict that we might see within Kit and Judith and themselves, Kit and Judith and each other. And then how is Mercy going to be affected by this? Mercy, the pivot that everybody kind of goes around. Now, William Ashby, Matthew said it early on in the book. Is he a loyalist? Or is he more like Matthew? And how is that going to affect things? How is that going to contribute to our plot? To the conflict of the story? We'll keep reading and find out. Okay, up next is chapter 7. Make sure you guys read it. Doing a great job. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.